In the country, there's going to be a very good chance that your new Toyota hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or electric vehicle will be powered by a battery that comes off the line in this facility.
Under the bright lights of Kentucky's assembly lines, something once unthinkable is unfolding. The heartbeat of American auto manufacturing, a place that symbolized strength and precision for decades, is beginning to falter. The Toyota Georgetown plant, once the pride of Kentucky's industrial landscape, is no longer running at full rhythm. The machines still hum, but the tempo has changed. Lexus production has stopped entirely, and Toyota's RAV4 line, once a powerhouse of global demand, has been scaled back. What many believed was a momentary slowdown has quietly grown into something much bigger, something reshaping the future of American manufacturing itself. Across the Midwest and South, the shockwaves are spreading. Parts suppliers are cutting hours. Truckers who once hauled full loads now wait for calls that never come. State officials are avoiding the cameras, unwilling to admit that the downturn could rival the losses of the pandemic years. Toyota insists its workforce in Kentucky remains safe, but the ecosystem around it, the small factories, the logistics hubs, the machine shops, tells a different story. Entire local economies built around Toyota's stability are starting to feel the pressure. What's happening here isn't a local hiccup. It's the product of national policy. When the White House unveiled its 25% tariff on imported cars and parts earlier this year, it was framed as a bold move to bring jobs back home. The slogan, "Make it American again," promised a manufacturing revival. But instead of building opportunity, the tariffs built barriers. According to the Center for Automotive Research, automakers operating in the United States faced nearly $18 billion in new costs within the first year alone. Production across North America fell by more than 20,000 vehicles per day, a staggering 30% drop within a single month. The effects were immediate. Volvo, Audi, Mercedes-Benz and Hyundai began scaling back their operations or shifting them to countries outside the tariff's reach. Those who stayed were forced to raise prices. For American families, the average price of a new car broke past $50,000, making ownership a distant dream for many in the middle class. The goal was to revive American factories. Instead, it's begun to suffocate them. One factory, one paycheck, one family at a time. While the United States was tightening its borders and raising its costs, something entirely different was happening across the northern border. Canada saw an opportunity. Instead of sealing itself off, it opened up. Ottawa's message was simple: stability, partnership, and predictability. In that calm, global automakers began moving their bets northward. Honda led the charge, announcing a record $15 billion investment to build a massive electric vehicle and battery complex in Ontario. Backed by nearly $5 billion in federal and provincial incentives, it became the largest project in Honda's history in Canada. The site is expected to create around 1,000 jobs and reach a production capacity of roughly 240,000 EVs and 36 gigawatt-hours of batteries annually by 2028. Toyota followed the same trail, expanding its own footprint in Ontario. By taking advantage of trade frameworks like the CPTPP and USMCA, Toyota gained access to over 50 global markets without the tariff walls now surrounding the US. What emerged in Canada wasn't only a cluster of factories, it was a new model for industrial strategy. Ottawa's Made in Canada plan prioritized three pillars: clean energy, long-term investment, and predictable policy. While Washington built obstacles, Ottawa built certainty. The outcome speaks for itself. Japanese automakers now produce nearly half of all vehicles made in Canada, roughly 930,000 cars each year. Toyota leads with about 500,000 units, followed closely by Honda with 430,000. New research and development centres in Ontario and Windsor are adding thousands of high-skilled jobs, while Canada's clean energy grid keeps production costs about 20% lower than in the US. In an era defined by volatility, Canada turned predictability itself into a competitive advantage. Meanwhile, back in the United States, the cracks are widening. Toyota, long considered a benchmark for efficiency and resilience, has become one of the biggest victims of Washington's tariff gamble. The company's global earnings took a hit of nearly $9.5 billion, the sharpest drop in the entire industry. Within the first quarter of 2025, Toyota's North American operations swung from profit to loss as tariffs pushed expenses toward $3 billion. The company cut its annual profit forecast by 16%, citing shrinking demand, higher costs, and a supply chain stretched thin. Executives have been candid. Protectionism doesn't protect jobs, it relocates them. And on the ground, that statement has turned into reality. Plants that once operated around the clock now stand partially idle. Suppliers are reducing shifts, and communities that once thrived around auto production are seeing small shops and service businesses close their doors. The phrase, "build it in America," is starting to ring hollow as those very jobs quietly move across the border. The problem runs deeper than payrolls or profits. The entire supply chain, the web of parts, materials, and logistics that feeds America's auto plants, is being pulled apart. Imported components account for nearly 40% of the total value of a vehicle assembled in the US. When tariffs hit those imports, every link in the chain feels it. Steel, aluminum, and copper prices have risen between 18 and 40%, adding roughly $3,000 to the cost of every car built domestically. For small and mid-sized parts manufacturers, the math no longer works. More than 500 suppliers have either suspended operations or closed temporarily, unable to absorb the cost surge. Even giants like Ford and GM have trimmed their domestic output by up to 10% this year, blaming material shortages and higher logistics expenses. And beyond the assembly lines, the slowdown has crept into the transportation sector. Auto haulers report the weakest shipment volumes in over a decade and a half. A sign that production isn't only slowing, it's shrinking. What began as a plan to restore American industrial strength has instead turned into a slow unwinding of it. Across the Midwest, the silence in factory lots speaks louder than any policy speech. Every halted line and cancelled shipment represents another missed opportunity, another fracture in an industry once defined by motion. North of the border, however, the tone couldn't be more different. Canada's strategy is paying off. While US plants scale down, Canadian production is scaling up. By pairing clear industrial goals with steady policy, Canada has positioned itself as the continent's new hub for electric vehicles and batteries. Its trade network spans the EU, UK, Japan, and Pacific nations under the CPTPP, allowing Canadian-built vehicles to move freely into more than 50 markets. That kind of reach is something US manufacturers can no longer take for granted. Beyond the numbers, Canada's approach reflects a broader philosophy, long-term thinking over short-term wins. The focus on clean power, stable labour costs, and sustainable growth has drawn investments that look decades ahead. Every new factory or R&D centre in Ontario or Windsor isn't just a production site. It's part of an ecosystem built for endurance. In contrast, America's approach has grown reactive, driven by quick political points rather than cohesive planning. The tariffs meant to fortify the economy are now fragmenting it. Factories dependent on imported components are the first to feel the blow, but the pain doesn't stop there. From steelworkers in Pennsylvania to parts suppliers in Tennessee, everyone connected to the auto industry is feeling the pressure of policy decisions made far above their pay grades. Industry analysts warn that if the current path continues, the United States could lose up to a quarter of North America's entire auto supply chain by 2030. Canada, meanwhile, is projected to capture up to 40% of the region's EV and battery production capacity within that same period. What's happening isn't a headline moment, it's a slow, quiet migration of industrial power. In the long view, the divide between these two neighbours couldn't be clearer. The US is retreating behind political walls, while Canada is expanding through consistency and collaboration. Ottawa isn't chasing slogans, it's laying out strategy. It has turned stability into an economic weapon, one that's proving far more effective than any tariff could ever be. The tariffs, central to Trump's trade agenda since his return to the White House earlier this year, were intended to protect American industries and strengthen the US economy. But small American businesses, from toy makers to wine importers, say the opposite has happened. Many have been forced to lay off workers, cut production, or slash prices to stay afloat. Their lawsuit claims the president's tariffs are unconstitutional, a view already upheld by two lower courts. The Court of International Trade in New York ruled that Trump lacked the authority to impose them, citing the Constitution's clear assignment of trade regulation to Congress. That decision was later affirmed by the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals in Washington. Now the Supreme Court, the nation's final arbiter, has stepped in.